Radio All for Peace.
So welcome back to Kol HaShalom Radio, Radio All for Peace. I'm Josh Scal, and I'm here with Hamed today. Hamed we just heard a clip from Hamed from the day in Bethlehem, and the things he showed us there. So now we're going to delve deeper into these questions, look for more of the causes, the things that really drive what we heard. So I'd just like to start. So can you briefly go over the governance structure in Area C and the way Israel essentially administrates the building, the economy, the water, utilities, things like that?
Well, as mentioned earlier, Area C constitutes about 60% of the West Bank. And that's actually where most of the concentration of activities is located. As per the Oslo agreements, Area C actually has the Israeli authorities, especially the army, is the one who is responsible for all of the administrative and security regimes in that area. So in terms of any building that is supposed to be taking place in Area C, the Palestinians are supposed to be asking for a permit from the civil administration of the Israeli army, which usually is supposed to be able to give or deny such permits. For the most part, as what we know and what we see on the ground, is that it's rarely that we have actually a permit being issued by the Israeli authorities for Palestinians to allow building in that region. But because what we have from the Palestinian side, the natural growth is ongoing. It's not only for settlers. So the Palestinians will actually take that chance of having to go ahead and build in Area C, hoping that the Israeli authorities would not be able to actually see them. However, as we know, they do see them and they do issue demolition orders, and demolitions are taking place at least on a monthly basis. We see reports of demolitions, be it in the Jordan Valley, be it in the South Hebron Hills, be it in Bethlehem, and of course, in a different manner in East Jerusalem.
Okay, so can you kind of go over the process of getting a building permit and how residents deal with, either having a building permit accepted or what they do when it's denied?
Well, usually, as I mentioned earlier, people, given that they've known that it's kind of an impossibility to get a building permit, they end up actually building anyway. And that is usually deemed by Israeli definition as something that's illegal because no permit has been obtained from the relevant authorities, which is actually, to begin with, as I said, it's very difficult because for the most part we do not have what was called a master plan. The Israeli authorities demand that we have a master plan first before actually being able to give permits to build. And for the most communities in the south, in Area C, most of them do not have such a master plan. Some of them have been, have filed for a master plan, and they've been going over and over and over in order for them to be able to get that right. So once an illegal, quote unquote, an illegal building is discovered, then they serve it as a military. They serve it with a stop work order. Even if it's the case that this house has been built 15 years ago, you have to actually give it first a stop work order and a second stop work order and then a demolition order.
Okay. And so you mentioned on the audio clip that there are only around 14 master plans being considered right now by the Israeli government. So obviously there are hundreds of communities in need of these master plans, but what's the Israeli government's mission, I guess, or what's the purpose of considering so few? Why would they, intentionally make life difficult for people in Area C?
Well, our understanding, and this is something from the ground, and it has actually been voiced by a number of members of the Knesset, trying to find some sort of a solution for all this kind of peace process. And some of the suggestions that I think is actually gaining more momentum is actually the annexation of Area C. You're talking about an area that is about 60% of the West Bank, All of the settlements are located there. Most of the natural resources are located in these areas. So as a step to actually to solve this issue, this conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, there's that suggestion of actually having to annex Area C, only Area C, into Israel. Which, yes, you will have some people, especially the United Nations, coming up and actually objecting to that movement, or the international community in general. But that's always happening. Or you have all that is, the objections are taking place. So might as well, why don't you annex Area C? So it seems that this idea is taking root, and we see that from all of the pressures by the Israeli army on the Palestinian residents in Area C, especially in the Jordan Valley, to actually to deny them any kind of a basic right of any regular human basic right, in order for them to, on the hope that they're going to pack up and leave, and then that area would be vacant, so it would be much easier for them to actually to annex it into Israel.
Sure. So there's a lot of violence that has sprung up between settlers and Palestinians in Area C. Yes. Coming from just the friction of living near each other, and the implications of that. And so isn't it actually, safer if these communities are more separated, if there's, distance between the Israelis and the Palestinians then?
Yeah, but the problem is that, and that has been duplicated in the old city of Hebron, for example, when you actually do have kind of buffer zones between the two population. But in terms of the settlements that are located in Area C, the problem that we're facing is that the settlements are continuously expanding, and expanding on the expense of Palestinian land. So in Area C, for the most part, Palestinians who are living in that area, they depend, 100% mainly on the land, because they usually are herders or farmers who actually see the access to land is actually a major part of their livelihood. So even though that if you want to make that buffer zone is going to be coming on the expense of the Palestinians, who are going to be denied access to a major source of livelihood for themselves, which is the land. So, maybe in theory it's good to actually to have that, but really in reality, that usually comes on the expense of the Palestinians, who really would like to actually to use that land to actually to live, a peaceful life as much as possible.
Sure. All right. So for better or for worse, though, the Israeli government is, and the military as well, is able to enforce its will in Area C.
Right.
But I'm sure there has to be some, pushback against these policies. So what institutions or what people or what groups are there to, to kind of combat, to present the other side to the Israeli government?
Well, the South Hebron Hills, where I work for the most of the part, is actually a very good example of the Israeli-Palestinian cooperation. You have a number of organizations, Israeli and Palestinians, working together in order for them to actually to kind of stand firm against these policies that have been implemented that's actually adding more misery to the Palestinian population. You have, for example, Rabbis for Human Rights. You have Ta'ayush. You have the Villages Group. You have so many activists breaking the silence.
All non-profits?
All non-profits that are actually coming down to the ground, and actually, that's what I like about that part of the country, is that, the borders between a Jew and a Muslim, between an Israeli and a Palestinian, between a Christian and a Jew, usually disappear. Because for the most part, we are people who are on the ground as humans, irrespective of what are the other backgrounds that actually define us as our identity, but we are humans, trying to see what is the impact of the occupation on other humans, and trying to actually to mitigate that as much as possible. So yes, we have good cooperation down in the south, and I think it serves as a good example of what, as humans, irrespective of our religion, identity, beliefs, what have you, can actually do to stop the ugly face of the occupation.
Mm-hmm. So the Jews and the Israelis that visit and participate in this nonprofit work, what's their reaction to the situation on the ground? How do they see their government? How do they see
To be honest,
their neighbors?
I'm working with a Jewish Palestinian group there, and rarely, for the life of me, that we actually have spoken about politics. We've been working together for like 12 or 13 years at this point in time, and we cannot recall any one given point in time that we said, okay, what is going on in Gaza is wrong, and you Israelis are supposed to be stopping it, and you're supposed to be doing this and that. We've never, ever actually had that argument, because the tasks that are in front of us are so humongous that you don't need only those small little groups. You need, an army of people in order for them to actually to face something like this. So, why introduce something that's going to actually to divide us? So, they are not there because they feel guilty about what the government is doing. They're not there because of feeling pity for the Palestinians. No, there is compassion. There is empathy of what's taking place. I know that if this has been taking place to any other population other than Palestinians, I know for myself I would have helped out, because you sympathize with the others. You don't do it out of guilt. You don't do it ever because of my government is an evil one, is doing all of these things. You don't do it that way. You just do it as a compassion for the others.
Human to human.
Basically.
Great. So we've talked about nonprofits, and we've talked about the Israeli government and Palestinian groups. But the Palestinian Authority, though it doesn't have control over Area C, is there any involvement from the PA in protesting these demolition orders or working to strengthen communities?
Yeah, for sure. There is that role that the PA is actually doing, but it's not to the best expectations of the population. The population always is believing that the Palestinian Authority should actually do more than it's doing. But, having to have spoken to a number of officials in the PA, they are usually faced with this issue of A, non-jurisdiction in that area, B, that they do not have enough resources to be able to actually to meet the needs of the population there. The population, in turn, do not maybe understand the complexity of the whole situation, so there's always that kind of grievousness that they have against the Palestinian Authority, despite that it's the fact that it's doing its best. But because of the lack of resources, they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now moving, scoping out a little beyond the PA, Israel has really come in the eyes of the international community lately for the war in Gaza, and increasingly for human rights issues in the West Bank as well.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the school we saw was built with USAID money. But beyond that, is there much diplomatic pressure or foreign aid coming in, or is this mostly a domestic issue?
Well, foreign aid is coming in, and remember a couple of days ago there was this campaign by Regavim in which they've accused the EU of actually having to create Palestinian settlements in Area C, which is against the law, and they're supposed to be, that the EU is supposed to be asked about their policies in those areas. Foreign aid is coming in. However, it's becoming more and more difficult to actually to work in Area C with that aid. There's a lot of policy that has been issued specifically by the EU, in which that they direct that they're saying that there's going to be more interventions in Area C, and that is definitely a course of collision between the EU and Israel. People are getting fed up, let's say, of the inability of having to have a sustainable projects in Area C, because a lot of the international community is seeing that this is going to be the future for the Palestinian Authority, for the Palestinian state to be able to function and to be able to be viable. It has to have access to Area C, for sure. And the EU and some other international donors are pushing towards that we will have more and more projects in that area.
Okay, so you brought up the friction between foreign aid, foreign governments, and the state of Israel in Area C. So how have you seen the Israeli government's reaction? Have they been able to facilitate help? Have they been more counterproductive to aid flowing in?
Well, I wouldn't be able to actually to say much about that, but what I'm definitely seeing that for the past, let's say, 7 years, for example, that we are still having that tension has always been there between the international aid and between Israel. How much can you actually put in? Are you allowed? Are you not allowed? All that's going back and forth. But that, at least from my part, from my point of view, did not make things easier on the ground. Because we are seeing it on daily basis that people are still playing the same tricks. The international NGOs are still trying to mitigate something between what the Israelis are saying and what the donors are saying. So that game is still ongoing without becoming any easier, and I don't see it to become easier in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit to something else that came up again and again in our few hours together. And that's the issue of the security fence, the separation wall, whatever you'd like to call it.
Yes.
So later in the show, we'll hear from a man named Louis who traveled to Israel legally, bypassing the security fence, to get work opportunity, employment opportunity in Israel that he didn't see available in the West Bank. So we also will hear from the same thing from the Bedouin community in Khair, speaking about this illegal crossing. And they specifically brought up the area of Ramadin, the crossing in the fire zone there, the military zone. So can you talk a little bit about that and, how the influx of illegal Palestinians into Israel, affects the idea of the wall and the idea of security?
Yeah, well, it's always been sold to the international community that the reduction of the suicide bombings that has taken place in the early 2000s, 2002 up to maybe 2007, that actually the reduction of that has been attributed largely to the barrier, and I beg to differ with that point of view, that the barrier is actually only one factor of the reduction of something like this, but not the major factor. And to that point, you can point out to the large number of Palestinians who even cross the barrier itself. You go to Abu Dis, for example, you will actually see that people will bring ladders and then put it on that specific wall and then actually cross to the other side. So in the case that there is going to be any Palestinian faction who wants to carry out similar attacks, the barrier is not going to be the one who's going to stop them, because we have so many holes in the barrier. We have even the barrier itself is bypassable. Some other areas, and especially in the South Hebron Hills, that they don't have the barrier to begin with, any form of the barrier, be it the cement or be it the electronic or what have you. So that in itself, it contributed as a one factor, but it's not the main factor of actually having to stop that. And as I said, maybe, and this is again another maybe conspiracy theory, is that these holes in the wall are allowed to stay because there is a dependency on cheap labor that comes in from the West Bank into Israel, so that they can work in a much cheaper fashion than the ones who actually do have legal permits to actually to go and work inside of Israel.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure government administrative official would disagree with you, but who knows?
This is the point of view from the ground.
Exactly. Okay. So obviously the wall adds this element of security for Israelis, or at least you've said ostensibly adds that element. But beyond that, what have you seen the wall's effects, more psychologically or within society, in people's minds?
Well, I know a number of communities that, especially in South Hebron Hills and maybe a little bit more of west of Hebron, that actually used to be in the past, that was the grazing fields are, beyond the green line. And they will be able to actually to go in that area and then graze their sheep and then come back as the main source of livelihood, and that has actually been cut off because of the barrier. Some other localities were able to actually, as laborers, they would be able to just, cross into Israel and then go and work and then, come back and with no problem. Now that the barrier is being there, having to actually to bypass that specific location has become harder and harder. So definitely economically, that has a devastating impact on some Palestinian, or actually a large number of Palestinian communities. The restriction that people have to be of a specific age or specific marital status in order for you to be able to get a permit in order for you to go into Israel, that cut off a large number of Palestinians, especially the youth that are at the beginning of their life, that they want to actually to be able to form families and actually to continue with their life in a dignified manner. All these has been cut off because of the barrier. So economically, definitely that has a much bigger negative impact on the Palestinian communities. The barrier, again, especially in the northern parts of the West Bank, once you have a lot of rain actually coming in, it used to be able to go directly from the West Bank directly into Israel and go directly to the sea. Now that you actually had that barrier as being established right on the Green Line, or actually a little bit inside of the West Bank, all of that water actually was supposed to be going to flow has been stopped at that, and that actually ended up with drowning a lot of the greenhouses and the farms which the Palestinians used to use as a livelihood source.
All right, so it's an environmental issue as well.
As well.
Okay, and so in the foreseeable future, the security fence, the separation wall, it's here to stay for the most part. In most Israelis' minds.
Yeah.
But what about the situation in Area C? Do you see any improvements coming in the future? Do you have faith that the Israeli government, the international community, the PA will be able to institute some kind of change and make lives a little better for people in Area C?
As somebody who's on the ground, I don't see that there's going to be any improvement but that's my personal point of view. I don't see any kind of possibility for improvement in Area C. The dialogue, let's say, between the international community and Israel, and for the most part the PA, about Area C has been ongoing ever since, maybe 1998, where the last time that we as Palestinians ended up getting some land back, have actually started then. That's really, in order for the Palestinian to have a viable state, the extension into Area C is a must. But all that has been talk. There's been so many plans. There has been so many dialogues, so many conferences, so many workshops about that issue that really did not change things on the ground. And especially now that with the huge increase in settlement activity and expansions and the use of archaeology by the settlers in order for them to gain more and more land, we don't see that actually things are going to improve in Area C. Rather, we are actually seeing it to deteriorate even more and more so in the future.
All right, well, inshallah, next time we speak, it'll be on more optimistic terms, all right?
Inshallah.
So thank you so much, Hamed. It was a real pleasure having you here all the way from Hebron. So I just want to take the time to thank you for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon, okay?
Our pleasure.
So we'll hear another Broza song, and we'll be back with you from the community of Al Khair on the other side.
Radio All for Peace.